Welcome everybody to the fourth session of the From the Ground Up Western Cover Crop Council Pacific Northwest Subregional Conference Series. My name is Stephen Hines. I'm an extension educator with the University of Idaho, and I'll be your host today. I would like to mention that this conference is sponsored by a grant of the Western SARE organization. So today's session is going to focus on the seed industry side of the cover crops. All right, now we're going to move to the panel discussion with experts in the cover crop seed industry. From Oregon, we have Don Wirth with Saddle Butte Ag, Gary Weaver from Weaver Seed of Oregon, and Jerry Hall from Grassland, Oregon. And from Idaho, we have Kent Whittig from Allied Seed. We'd like to thank you gentlemen for taking your time and sharing your expertise with us. So the first question, Don, please briefly introduce yourself and your business, and keep it brief to a couple of minutes if you would, please.
All right. I've been on the same farm since 1950, and that's where I started. In 2000, the son-in-law and daughter took over the farm. Down through the years, I've served on 21 commissions. 23 years ago, I started promoting cover crops with the help of the Ryegrass Commission. Saddle Butte was started in the 90s. Cover crops that we sell our big one is Bounty Annual Ryegrass. That was what we really started with. Then IU Kale, Vital Vetch, Cahaba Vetch, Shield Mustard, Enricher, Radish, Mehigh Persian, Balanza Clover, have access to Piper Sedan, Woolly Pod, Sun Hemp, Faba Beans, Common Vetch, et cetera, et cetera. We hired our first Midwest associate in 2002. That's where our primary focus has been. Currently have 4 associates in Illinois and Minnesota. Have 2 mixing facilities that we're closely related with in the east of the Rockies, plus one in the Oregon here. And then several of our customers have their own mixing facilities.
Where do you sell most of your seed into?
Well, our cover crop seeds, obviously the Midwest.
Okay.
I focus primarily north of the Mason-Dixon line to some degree, because many varieties will work south of that. I was working on varieties like our Bounty that was one of the more winter hardy ones, etc. North of that, and on up into, we've done quite a little work with interseeding in like the Montreal area, Canada. We have a good customer up there that's done lots of interseeding for probably close to 12 years.
Great, thank you. Gary, welcome.
Weaver Seed was founded by my wife and myself in 1980. We originally made, and still are, a major producer of sprouting peas to Asia. Then we started in the cover crop and the forage business a little later on, probably in the 1990s. Our cover crop that division's been growing every year. We have a Magnum Oat, which is a tall forage, good yielder. Sub-Zero forage kale, which is a good winter kale, and it takes a snow load. Forerunner triticale, which is a spring or fall plant, which produces good mass and an excellent root system for cover crop. Frostmaster winter peas, we put those on through both fall and spring cover crops. They're white flowered, they're sweet. So they're also added, probably third of the market where we go is for wildlife, because they're sweet. They're not bitter like the purple type flowers. Buster radish is our largest seller, and it's sold by the truckloads almost every week. Broadleaf mustard is a new one that we're playing with, and it covers the ground quick, and it also handles snow loaded. Very popular in the Kansas area right now for winter forage, along with the Sub-Zero and triticale or oats. Spelt is new for us. We just started last year. We trialed it in several different areas, and one of the fellows last week called up and he said he needed 10 truckloads this fall. Well, we didn't plan anything like that after we trialed it, but he will get 2 or 3 truckloads. But the roots on it are the best I've ever seen in anything, period. Massive roots, they go down deep. I think the best systems we have today for cover crops and forage are probably triticale, spelt, annual ryegrass, and the sub-zero broadleaf forage winter kale also goes down deep.
Thank you, Gary. Jerry.
So my name's Jerry Hall. I'm with Grassland, Oregon. We are a breeder and marketer of cover crop seeds. We've got 2 research locations. We've got one here in Salem, Oregon, which is kind of in the middle of the Willamette Valley, more towards the north type side. And we've got a research farm in Richland, Iowa, which is in the southeast portion of Iowa. So that's where we screen a lot of our products for cold tolerance. We got started breeding cover crops over 15 years ago when we started looking at the high prices of nitrogen, and we really felt that green manures could make a comeback. So we've put a lot of focus on that aspect. Some of the varieties that we've released include the Dynamite Red, Kentucky Pride, which we licensed from University of Kentucky, our Fixation Balanza, for Osteoberseem and Survivor Peace. We just recently have started breeding brassicas, which is kind of fun and a little challenging, but we're constantly evaluating and screening new material. We sell our cover crop seed globally through distributors primarily. We don't do much in the way of retail, though we are reevaluating those sorts of things as the markets have changed. And that pretty much sums up what we're doing, Steve.
All right, thank you. Kent, what's happening in Idaho?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, so my name's Kent Whittig, and I'm with Allied Seed Company. Just a little bit about me. I grew up on a seed farm in Southwest Idaho and have been involved with seed my entire career. A little bit about Allied Seed. I'll start to the west and work back to the east, but we do have a facility in Albany, Oregon. And over there, we grow a bunch of, primarily turf and forage grasses, but there we can contract, receive, treat, package, and ship seed out to our customers. Going into Idaho, our headquarters are in Nampa, and there we also contract, receive, clean, condition, treat, ship out seed to our customers in our footprint. And just south of Nampa, in a little town called Melba, we have another facility. And about 4 years ago, I got that converted to an organic facility, and the organics is only for our cover crops. And so there we do cleaning, processing, packaging, Armory approved treatments, and shipping out. And then our last location is in Worland, Wyoming. And there it's kind of like the Idaho locations as far as what we do, different products of what we grow. As far as what we grow and produce, any given year, it's 80 different not species necessarily, but varieties, several varieties within species. Looking at some of our legumes, we grow a bunch of different alfalfas, different clovers, sandfoins, vetches, lespedeza, lentils, lupins, different, spring and winter type peas. We do a lot of different brassicas, which would include your radishes, mustards, turnips, kale, rutabaga, and all sorts of different forage grasses, ranging anywhere from, annual types to perennial. And then we do quite a bit with some of our summer annual hybrids and, sorghum Sudans, sorghum and forage grains, teff, and then, other miscellaneous broadleaves such as buckwheat and phacelia. As a company, we sell in all 48 lower states and several Canadian provinces and a few locations globally. And my region is basically west of the Rockies, and I do have one customer in Hawaii, and my hope is to get them big enough that I can justify a trip to go visit them sometime. But that's it for Allied.
Dawn, this is probably a good time for you to share those slides that you put together. What recommendations or ideas do you have for different cover crop species or varieties or mixtures?
Well, this is kind of where we're located. We're actually on the farm or office. We're not in the urban heights like some of the others. This slide on the left is in Idaho. A young producer tried interseeding, which we think you ask about new things. I think this is one of the newer things in the cover crop world, and this is showing you when you use the wrong species. The slide on the right is in Iowa, planted at about V4, V5, and that's Bayou kale. On the left is annual ryegrass with little Bayou intermixed at the same time. And what we're finding with that interseeding is it's nothing to reduce the soil temperatures in that Midwest climate up to 20 degrees. And consequently, the competition of the cover crop when it stays small is offset by reducing root damage on the corn from the heat. Also get you off, so you got, if you happen to have a wet fall, you got some sod to run on, which they really saw in Canada when harvesting silage. The picture on the right there is post-harvest in southern Minnesota also. The thing that was interesting is there was some radish in this mixture on the right, which I didn't get a good picture of. But what intrigued me was any place the tires touched the radish, it broke it off. So it was done. It done all it was going to do. But we think that's part of the future. I also did some work here a few years ago, or was involved, I didn't do the work, with some different seeding things up in the fire area, that big fire area north of Payette, Idaho. And in this picture, you can see our Bayou kale, our plantain, there's a little bit of chicory. And this is big clover, which I don't know if there's any seed source for, but totally intrigued by the ground cover. And I am real excited. I think when you study some of the stuff that Alan Wilson relates to us and stuff about getting forages, and that's one of our other things. I realize this is a cover crop, but we also work pretty hard on forages and new concepts. But I think that a lot of the sagebrush country has a lot of potential to increase production. The other thing, and back up to cover crops a little, one of the things I like about the brassicas, for example, Mark Azevedo over here at USDRS at OSU is pretty well convinced that the root exudates from oats, chelates some of the metals, which is kind of like a poor man's lime. It helps. When I was a young kid, all of this country around here had a few livestock. We grew spring grain. Any place we'd always plant the oats on the poorest ground in the spring. If we got a mediocre to fair crop, the next couple of years, we grew pretty good ryegrass on that country. And we weren't doing much liming yet or anything. So that was kind of interesting. And here it is 50 years later, getting the science to see what we was observing. This field here had been an annual ryegrass production for 22 plus years. And the reason I put this slide in, we get a lot of flack about ryegrass can't be controlled. This has one application by the prescription the Oregon Ryegrass Commission recommends. And that's the only herbicide on there. And this ryegrass was probably 4 or 5 inches tall when they sprayed. And yes, there's some stuff volunteering because he didn't put any residual on. But this shows that ryegrass can be controlled when people spray it right, full rate, proper time, proper buffer, proper wetting agents. All those things are key to getting control.
Great, thank you, Don. Gary, you're up next. If you could go ahead and unmute.
Well, we find that usually if we're talking about the farm, we trial everything here. In fact, we'll be doing about 18 different plots of new peas for the USDA this spring. You ask a hard question, what do you recommend? Well, we have to have soil types, what the following crop is, what the pH is. It's not an easy answer. Don and Jerry and ourselves blend to what the grower wants. And the grower he's our boss. We put blends in. We have a blender in the south, and it's doing over 4 million pounds a year. But the grower will call up and say, I need some Balancha clover, triticale, black oats, crimson clover, whatever they want. And that's how we make the decisions down there. For the Northwest, almost everything that the three of us have will fit in cover crops here. Okay, that's a field of spelts. It was underwater from this was in April when we had the high flood come through here, unusual. But that spelt field was underwater from 10 to 21 days, and we didn't lose a plant. Next to it was some Magnum oats and some triticale, and those two where they were underwater was pretty much a weed patch the next spring. The picture on the right was taken in March, and if you go to the slide with the roots on it, we can show you what the root mass was at that time. That was March. It was planted in October, as you can see, but that was the root mass for those plants that were sitting there with the bottle. They were only about 20 inches tall. And to the left shows what it was after flooding, how it looked. We didn't lose anything. Amazing plant. It's probably going to be one of our best sellers. That spelt, when it was growing, that was taken here to place. There was two different varieties. One on the left was one that had awns on it, and the one on the right is our spelt right, the one we took into production. And these are the roots here on that one, on the right there. This is our pollinator plants, and I've been doing that we've been planting pollinators here on the farm for about 15 years. We've seen a increase of bumblebees probably tenfold. We planted usually in May, sometimes in June, and then sometimes we stick some in the latter part of July, so there's pollinators for the fall. We're seeing a lot more native bees, little small things, but we've got a very good pollinator group here at our farm right now, and basically it's because we're planting for them. That's the bumblebee going to work right there, huh? And some honeybees here on the left one. More of the same. We're seeing a lot of queen honeybees coming out, and you see there's two different types right there. I don't know what the one on the left is, but the one on the right is our Willamette Valley average honeybee. I mean black bumblebee. These are our Frostmaster forage peas. They're white flowered. This picture was taken last spring in June, into June. They're very sweet. They go into cover crop. They're winter hardy cover crop. Probably 30% of them are going into wildlife plots in the southern part of the U.S. The one on the left is a forage pea, Biomaster. One on the right is a flowering field of daikon, buster radish. The Biomaster pea is a spring pea. A lot of it's going to California for the vineyards. Probably 70% of what we sell is going into vineyards, organic and regular, same. This is a picture I took in Texas in November of 2020. It's our buster radish and our forerunner triticale. I was planted in September. We were there on November 7th. This is just a brassica. This happens to be Florida broadleaf clover, mustard. We use that. They're using it more in the Midwest. They're planting it with their early cover crops, and it puts good forage, and they run the cows through it November to January in a blend with oats, triticale, whatever their desire is. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. I had the chance to go out and see that spelt in the field after that flood. It was pretty impressive to see. Jerry from Grassland, Oregon, could you tell us what your thoughts are about species, varieties, and mixtures?
I think the important part when looking at what to plant is the farmer needs to really think about what their goals are. And you need to give consideration for both above ground and below ground. Too often people, they'll throw together, a few species without thinking about how those species are going to interact. And when it comes to, basing recommendation, I like to see a little bit of variation in root type architecture. So you might want something that's a tap rooted, something more of a fibrous rooted, and then there's some of the things that are a little bit in between. So you've got to really prioritize your goal. Is it nitrogen fixation? Is it aeration? Are you looking to ease soil compaction? And I guess the last thing I would recommend is you really need to be aware of when these products are going to put on their growth curve as it relates to when you're going to want to plant the following crop. Like Taryn and Annie alluded to, a lot of these things are really going to put on most of their biomass in the late spring. And a little bit of patience goes a long way. So, when it comes to nitrogen fixation, you could, see as much as 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre by simply waiting a week. So, I think it's really important to know some of those parameters, work with your retailer who's selling those products to you, as far as will all the products that you're looking at in the mix, are they going to tick all the boxes that you need from a cover crop mixture? So, I think you just really need to be clear as to what are your priorities, what are you going after and trying to solve by applying a cover crop.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. Kent from Allied Seed up in Idaho, over in Idaho. Could you share your thoughts on species, varieties, seed mixtures?
Yeah, you bet. And where I was coming from on this was pretty similar to what where Jerry just went. But I generally say when I'm at events, whether it's an industry cover crop event or doing some one-on-one or small group meetings, have developed 3 goals, because there's a lot of things that these cover crops can do. But if you just narrow it to, what you prioritized as your top 3, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to focus on it and actually be successful. Other things to consider is, are you wanting a cool season species? So what time of year are you planting? Or are you looking for a warm season? Because you definitely don't want to mix those up, because you'll see subpar performance on that. Another thing that I like to mention for consideration is this going to be an annual species mix that you're putting together, or is it going to be a perennial? Or in some cases, are you going to see a little bit of both? And so just think about some of, what your targets are. Are they going to be more short-term, or is it going to be a multi-year? And one of the last things I like to say is, know your budget up front, because all of us can provide, these cover crop mixes. They can get pretty creative. They can get, expensive. We can make them, to fit your budget as well. So just have a good idea of what you want to spend, before you really sit down with your seed consultant or whomever you're working with at that point. And then that really helps drive that conversation, knowing the steps that I just identified of, what you want to do, how you want to do it, and we'll help you get there.
All right, great. Thanks, Kent. So we'll move on to the third question then, discussing the cover crop breeding and seed production process, kind of developing new varieties and maybe opportunities for farmers who want to produce seed. Don, we'll start with you.
Am I unmuted? There, I'm
There
unmuted.
you go.
I guess I'm going to back up on you a little bit on number 2, because I think there's a couple things there that hasn't been touched yet. Number 1 is how important is seed testing. I think it's critical. We've seen people in the Midwest, too many of them planting bin run. They're planting either their weeds or their neighbor's weeds, and what a way to propagate them. We also had customers come in, they bought seed without germinations. One guy called and needed seed right away because what he had bought from a cheap source was 20 germ or less. A couple novel uses. Lloyd Murdoch down at University of Kentucky has proven that annual ryegrass as a winter cover crop can break up 1 inch of fragipan soils each year. So one way to make new soils. Along that line, the brassicas, the root exudates from them will break the calcium phosphorus bond. I think we look at new varieties when we find a place that we think don't have a species or a variety that fits what some of the things have been talked about, whether it's type of root, et cetera, winter survival, winter kill, all of those things enter in. There was some question about farmers producing cover crop seed. I think I touched on that briefly, but if they don't have a processing plant, we've tried some stuff in other states. Neither the grower or the processor understood how big it could have been, and we ended up had to ship the seed someplace else to get it processed. So I think there is an opportunity, but if they're going to do it, they need to edit and make it a real study of what they're going to produce and how to produce and how critical certain cultural practices are to get the quality that's needed for the market.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
We're working on a project now, a first breeding program for this year will be a cross. We're going to cross a Takahashi type daikon radish with a Kaiwari type, because we're looking for a late flower. We're seeing in the production fields around it, we get a lot of fields have 2 or 3, 4%, maybe 5% early flowering. They plant that in the Midwest, and if they plant it early in August, it'll flower and it'll be a weed. It'll be a weed bed the next year. So we're working on that for late flowering. We're going to do spring trials this year. We'll have 5 acres of trials, and we're going to do several USDA types and some forage types. We're looking for roots. Basically, roots are as important as anything that we can do today.
Okay. Any thoughts for producers who might want to grow seed?
I'd leave it to the commercial growers. We tried it with some people last year. They didn't have the proper equipment, and they ended up with a field of weeds. It's hard to do. It's not easy. The Willamette Valley is blessed with several hundred professional seed growers, and they are good. I mean, 99% of them are excellent farmers.
Okay, thank you. Jerry?
So from a breeding standpoint, it can take a lot of time. You know, we've got a variety can be anywhere from 6 to 15 plus years in development. How we start is we first start screening. You know, we've screened somewhere around 40, 50 different species here at our research farm in Salem. Individual lines, we're probably getting close to 10,000 different lines we've looked at. And out of all that work, we've released a handful of products. There's as many or a lot more misses than there are hits as far as when it comes to varietal development. And then the other thing is when you see some of these exciting new varieties, it also takes time to multiply them. So when we're harvesting breeder seed, we might only get half a pound. And so the process of taking that half pound of breeder seed to commercial production, that could be another 3 to 4 years. You know, we've tried all the tricks to shorten that time frame up, you know, using counter season production south of the hemisphere. But you know, it's a challenging and very costly process. I think when you're growing cover crops, if you're exploring that, work with a seed company. And the reason why I say that is you want to make sure that you don't get crossways on intellectual property and start to infringe on that. So as a company that invests hundreds of thousands of dollars per year breeding cover crops, we protect our products. We've got a valuable investment in those, so we protect them via patent, PVP. It all depends, but I think by working with a seed company, if you want to go that route, that's the best beginning, simply so you can protect yourself from growing something that you shouldn't be, that you wouldn't have the rights to. We're continually looking at new areas of production. We do, and we evaluate, we work with county extension looking at potential, because ultimately, if cover crops globally take off like I think we can, we need to figure out where all we can grow these products. The Willamette Valley is a remarkable area, as Gary had stated, where we can grow a lot of seed here. But on the same hand, we feel that it's never that extra knowledge we can learn of where we can grow things, I think has some value. So, work with a seed company if you're wanting to grow seed. If you, like Don was talking about, varieties are generally better than VNS because they're predictable. VNS, you never know what you're getting. And I also stress, like Don did, really pay attention if you're planting cover crops, get a seed analysis certificate. Seed companies are required to have them. Sure, lots of times information's tagged, but you ask for that analysis certificate. That's not offending that seed provider. And you really want to know, if it says it's 0.03 weeds, what are those weeds? So that's the cautions and where I'll leave that. So.
All right, thank you. And Kent, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
so, in regards to Allied, I wouldn't consider us a true breeder of seeds. We do quite a few selections, but we mostly partner with private or university breeders, and focus on traits, whether it's in cover crops or forage, of what the end user growers are wanting. And for example, if I do a lot of nematode resistant cover crops, and so we want something, we're constantly striving to look for better resistance in Columbia root knot or sugar beet cyst nematode or any kind of root knot, or so on and so forth. And so we work with breeders on those, and we evaluate them, they're evaluating them, and just keep trying to find better things that are going to bring value to growers. One thing that I wanted to talk about too is, one of the questions on here was to talk about obstacles and challenges that are out there for growing new varieties. And so this is going to be geared towards all the Idaho producers that are on this call, but Idaho has a lot of strange laws when it comes to beans in this particular case. And so, we have what we call the phaseolus and then the non-phaseolus type beans. Phaseolus are going to be, like your kidneys, pintos. Non-phaseolus are the ones that we generally refer to in cover crops. And so the Idaho State Department of Ag early last year, had finally set some guidelines in place, and it was really to protect the Idaho Bean Commission and everything that they're doing. But they've identified that, okay, and I'm just going to give a nutshell of this, but if the seed, mung beans, cowpeas, chickpeas, guar, if they were not produced in the state of Idaho, they have to have there's got to be a test with that. it'll go through the phaseolus type of testing, the
Phytosanitary
thank
certificate.
you, Steve. That was the word that it slipped my mind. And you know, it's going to receive what they're going to call a yellow tag. And so if basically just assuring that there's no diseases that were, you know, seed borne on that seed coming into the state of Idaho and potentially infecting the phaseolus type beans. But there's a lot of other stipulations and you know, handcuffs with that, with yellow tag seed for cover crops. And you know, a lot of our areas we do have overhead irrigation. You can't plant these under overhead irrigation. It would have to be on gravity or drip of some kind, and so it's really limiting. But with that being said, and we talk about opportunities for seed growers, I'm doing some work with Marlon Winger in the NRCS and a couple other small producers in Southwest Idaho of looking at some of these non-phaseolus type beans, growing them in Idaho. We have to get yellow tag seed stock approved. They're going to have to grow that under gravity or drip for 2 years. And then going into that second year of harvest, that seed could then potentially be classified as green tag, meaning that now we can plant a lot of these warm season legumes, bean type plants in the state of Idaho with several of our mixes. And so I see that as an opportunity. And, you know, again, Idaho is a big bean production state, and there's a lot of processors out there that you guys can partner up with. And we're in the early stages. We're going to have some first year trials going out there this year.
Great, thank you, Ken. Doug Collins had a quick question about tiller radish. You'd mentioned.
Yeah, I'm in the maritime Pacific Northwest, so Western Washington, and I've used tillage radish one time, planted it September 15, and got great above ground biomass, but had, you know, very little root growth. And so I'm just wondering what would be an ideal window for planting to sort of maximize root growth. And I assume if you plant too early, you run into the issue of flowering in the fall, but.
Well, we like to see it planted mid-August, after the 10th of August. Your weather conditions after September, were they wet, cold? That's gonna, and what variety did you have? Was it a good radish? Was it one of the named varieties?
Yeah, it was a good variety. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a couple of years ago, but I mean, we tend to plant our fall cover crops. You know, we shoot for mid-September in general, but it just seemed if you're trying to maximize root growth, that's not going to work well for the tillage radish. I mean, we terminated it in the following spring when it started to flower, and there was, you know, very, very small root development.
Well, we plant them. What kind of soil was it on?
It's a sandy loam.
It should do well there, but I'd plant it. When we do root trials here, we plant 10th to the 20th of August, no later.
Okay.
The one thing, you know, and I think, Doug, you were talking primarily about radishes there, but they're light sensitive, and so, you know, for seed production, you know, we plant them in Southwest Idaho, Eastern Oregon in the spring. You know, for cover crops, you know, and kind of going with what Gary said, a lot of times I'll say when growers have concerns about that bolting and flowering and, you know, possibly going to seed, generally speaking, and I'm about the 43-degree latitude here, so you'd be a little higher. We don't have enough sunlight once we start getting past middle of August to initiate bolt on a lot of those. But yeah, the same thing, if you plant them too late, you get into September, you don't have enough heat units. And again, where I said they're really driven by light, you're not going to see a lot of growth. But there is a line that you can play with there where you can maximize below ground growth and limit that bolting initiation.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Yep.
See you next week.